Hello, welcome to the Talking Michigan Transportation Podcast. I'm Jeff Cranston. Michigan Central opened in Detroit in 1913 and designed by the same architects as New York's Grand Central Terminal, was considered a stunning architectural landmark and was the tallest train station in the world at that time. It was a symbol of the city of Detroit's industrial might, and later, sadly, became a symbol of blight instead. Now, through the vision of folks at Ford Motor Company and many others, it's a symbol again, this time of a great city's rebirth. So this week, Governor Whitmer joined others in announcing a memorandum of understanding between the Michigan Department of Transportation, the city of Detroit, and Michigan Central to begin preliminary assessments for a new multimodal transportation hub located within a 30-acre Michigan Central Innovation District on a parcel just southwest of the Michigan Central Station. MDOT is contributing some funds for it. We also secured about $10 million in federal funds for all of this. So it's truly exciting. I spoke about what all this means first with Arun Rao, who is Amtrak's Senior Director for Network Development in their Central region, which includes Michigan. Then with Sam Krassenstein, who is Chief of Infrastructure for the city of Detroit. I hope you enjoy the conversation. So Arun Rao, who I mentioned in the introduction, is the Amtrak Senior Director for Network Development for the Central region, was part of the festivities celebrating the MOU for Michigan Central, and really has some good insight into what this could possibly mean. I don't want to get too far ahead of things. There's a lot to do, but we're very hopeful that this spells good things for kind of a multimodal hub, kind of restoring the original purpose of Michigan Central. So Arun, thank you very much for taking time to be here. Could you talk about your work at Amtrak and what you do exactly?
Thank you very much. Yes. So I am in the network development department at Amtrak. That department, some of those tasks include planning and implementation of new or expanded corridors, improvements to existing routes. It could be extensions like this, and seeing that through from the early planning stages all the way to implementation. And I also have a role with developing state partnerships as well. We have a long-standing partnership with Michigan DOT for 3 services in Michigan that we operate. The Michigan DOT contracts with Amtrak for the Wolverine service, which is the route that we're going to be talking about today, Chicago, Detroit, and up to Pontiac. And then also the Chicago to Grand Rapids, Pierre Marquette, and Chicago to Port Huron, Blue Water. So those 3 routes that we contract with Michigan DOT for.
So I'll set aside for a later conversation my advocacy for a second line for Pierre Marquette. Those of us on the west side of the state and along the lake shore would really like to see that someday. But that's a whole nother conversation. Talk about yesterday's MOU announcement and what it could possibly mean. Like you said, this is the Detroit to Chicago route. It would mean moving the station from New Center north of downtown to that site, and it would create a possible connection to Canada, so you could one day go by train from Chicago to Toronto, right?
Yeah. So this proposed project really just takes one of those Wolverine round trips and routes it through Michigan Central, past the Michigan Central campus, and then into the Detroit River Tunnel to cross over into Windsor and head to Windsor via rail station. So at via Windsor rail station, passengers would detrain and go through Canadian Customs and Immigration at a new joint border facility in Windsor. And then they would proceed to a waiting via rail train to take them further east, or if Windsor is their final destination, they would be able to visit Windsor. So in the other direction, passengers would be coming from Toronto, get off the via rail train at Windsor, and then go through United States Customs Border Patrol pre-clearance in Windsor at the Windsor Joint Border Facility, and then get onto a secured waiting international Amtrak train that would then take them back across the border, would stop at Detroit, stopping at Michigan Central, and then on to Chicago, and all of the Michigan communities along the route. So the Detroit New Center station would still be in service under this scenario. There would still be the trains that proceed up to Pontiac would still be serving Detroit News Center. So this would just be one train initially heading into Windsor.
Okay, that's a good clarification. But I guess most importantly, when the Tigers play the Blue Jays in the playoffs next year, we'll be able to take the train to get to the playoffs, although it probably won't be done that soon. So
Absolutely.
I know you've got a lot going on in all the states in the central region, and you don't want to pick favorites, but really this has to be the most exciting project you're working on, right?
Well, I will say it's a very exciting project. It really is tremendous in terms of the collaboration that's happening among so many different parties. It's so simple. It's closing a 9-mile gap between two well-established services, but at the same time, it's complicated because we have to work with the border agencies and make sure we are designing things for their needs so that they can do this important function in Windsor. We are working with folks on the Canadian side, Transport Canada, our partner Via Rail Canada, on funding of improvements and planning for improvements that would have to take place in Windsor. And then, of course, all of our host railroads that we would be traversing for this extension, the local stakeholders in Detroit and Windsor who have been fantastic. So really, a lot of coordination, a lot of collaboration. In addition, of course, to Michigan DOT, who is our primary partner with this and who is really playing a leadership role for the Wolverine and this extension.
So you have to deal with a heck of a lot of things. I mean, the freight railroads share some of the lines in the Midwest, and we've got congestion issues. We've got freight railroad merger issues going on. We've got constant changes at the federal level. So I guess looking at it in the most futuristic way possible, what's your gut tell you about the future of passenger rail travel in the Midwest?
I think intercity passenger rail travel in the Midwest, despite all of those challenges, is only going to increase. We are seeing increases in ridership, more demand. When we introduce two new routes across the country, including in the Midwest, over the past 2 years, we have seen those just blow through their ridership forecasts. For example, the new Borealis service between Chicago, Milwaukee, and the Twin Cities through Wisconsin and Minnesota far exceeded its ridership projections, in those right off the bat, right out of the gate as it started. So there's just tremendous demand. Those trains are full. We just launched the Mardi Gras service between New Orleans and Mobile, Alabama. Same story. We are way over forecast. Those trains are full. There's just tremendous demand out there. There is definitely plenty of room for growth. We will have to continue to work well with the host railroads, with our host railroad partners. It will take, continued infrastructure improvements and investment in the railroad infrastructure. But I'm very optimistic about the success, really, of Amtrak in the Midwest. And it's just a lot to build off of.
What do you attribute that growth to? Is it younger generations just being interested in alternative modes of travel, or is it some of it a bit of nostalgia on people's parts that have just always liked trains but maybe had concerns about reliability, or is it just all of the above?
Yeah, I don't think it's really so much nostalgia. I think it's, as you said, younger generations are looking for other ways to travel, more productive ways to travel. But also retirees and senior citizens are flocking really to these new services and to our existing routes because they're not interested in driving anymore either. They want to have options, and for trips where rail can work, it can't work for every trip, but for the trips that people make where rail can work well, people are choosing rail if it works for them. So I'm seeing growth in all of those areas, and as well as student travel. We still have a significant business travel component as well. Even after COVID, While there may not be as much daily commuting after COVID, our services were really not really dependent on daily commuting. They have a lot of business travel for business meetings, for less than daily commuting. Maybe it's once a week. So we're seeing a lot of that as well.
So I should clarify that when you talk about a more productive way to travel, what you mean is you can be productive while you're traveling. That's the pull, right?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's really no other mode that can match what Amtrak service can provide in terms of collaboration and productivity while you're traveling with, free Wi-Fi, spacious seating, plenty of room to pull out a laptop, plug it in at a power outlet at your seat. There are also, 4 seats around, 4-seat tables where I see a lot of business meetings taking place. Really, there's no other, mode like that can really,
certainly
that way. Yeah.
Certainly playing euchre would be considered productive, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I have to say that Amtrak has a lot of really interesting names for the lines around the country, but Borealis has to be one of the coolest.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a really neat name, and it's a great service.
Well, you're based in Wisconsin, right? So it's probably a special one for you.
Yes. I worked on that project when I was at the Wisconsin Department of Transportation as well. So I was happy to be able to move to Amtrak and continue to work on it and see it through.
Well, real interesting. Before we wrap up quickly, what do you see as the next steps for you in collaboration with the department and the city to bring this to fruition?
Yeah. So, the good news is there's a lot of components that are either already well underway or are finished or fully funded, I should say. So I think the governor's announcement on the multimodal center is a huge benefit. Amtrak would just be a tenant there, but we need that location to stop. So that being funded is a great milestone for this project. The second, we have some signal design improvements with Conrail, who owns the tracks that go near Michigan Central. We need to upgrade the signals system to a positive train control system. That is already underway. We have a design contract going on with Conrail right now for those improvements, and we will have construction of those improvements already funded through a safety program that Amtrak has access to. So really on the U.S. side, again, one of the most important things as well, I should say, is that Amtrak and CPKC, the railroad that owns and operates the Detroit River Tunnel, have an agreement came into an agreement in around 2021 for access to that tunnel with one round trip Amtrak train, with the possibility of increasing that to 2 in the future. So that really was a catalyst for getting this whole project moving.
Yeah,
so we have all of those things in place. Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that's significant that you've already got that agreement. So yeah.
Yes, yeah, and so it's really now, there's some work to do on the Canadian side. We've already had funding on the Canadian side to do some preliminary design and to engage with the border agencies. So it's continuing to engage with the border agencies, securing the funding for construction of those improvements in Windsor, and then really we'll be ready to go with our partnership with Via Rail Canada to make this happen.
Well, that's great. Thanks, Arun. I look forward to talking to you some more as this thing progresses. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And stay tuned once again. I'll be back with Sam Krassenstein, who's the Chief Infrastructure Officer for the City of Detroit. He also participated in the event and has done a lot of work and has a lot of good thoughts about what this will mean to the city and actually greater Detroit and multimodal travel. Stick around. There's more to come right after this short message.
Know before you go. Head on over to MyDrive to check out the latest on road construction and possible delays along your route. For a detailed map, head over to michigan.gov/drive.
Sam Krassenstein, once again, repeat appearance on the podcast. I spoke earlier with an Amtrak official about what this Michigan Central MOU could mean to them from a multimodal standpoint, but I really wanted to get your perspective because you're all about broader infrastructure in the city and all the things going on. So talk about what you think this means, and really just how exciting it's been for you to be a part of this, to come along at such a transformational time.
Well, thanks again for having me as a repeat customer on the show. So, I mean, it's super exciting. So ever since Ford came in and purchased the station, we started to see what some of the plans looked like. The potential for changing the neighborhood and changing the transportation landscape has been happening at a real lightning pace. So if you consider all of the changes just over the last 5 years in this part of the city, you have Ford's renovation into the train station and into developing New Lab as a hub for mobility innovation, not just locally but really internationally, with the type of talent and companies they're attracting. You have MDOT's investment of nearly $70 million to redo Michigan Avenue into a really cool not just like streetscape for placemaking purposes, but also an innovation corridor that's going to have a lot of cool technology, which could include traditional EV charging. We're looking at the Electron pilot. We're looking at the latest signal and pedestrian detection technology. And it's really a lot of cool things happening there. And then on the far side of Corktown, you have the new DCFC Stadium that is proposed to open as soon as early 2027, in which you're going to have a new 15,000 person arena for the soccer stadium as well as concert venue. So you have a lot of interesting things that are happening in the background that have either already come to fruition or that are proposed over the next few years. And now you have this $40 million investment in the new multimodal transportation hub, which is fancy way of saying we're going to have the Amtrak station be here in the city, as well as the intercity bus terminal, both that are located at other parts of the city, and the facilities aren't I would say they're in need of updates.
Yeah, and you can take a bus from somewhere in Metro Detroit and get on the Amtrak train and go ultimately to Chicago or Toronto and never have to use your car, right?
That's definitely part of it. But I think I would say the even bigger part of it is you have the true gateway into the city. So even if people aren't transferring between modes, the fact that we have all the modes in one place and we create a really positive and bustling environment for people that are coming into the city and coming through the city all in one place, I think is going to be pretty impactful, not just for the neighborhood in the city, but for the whole region. So I think this is the type of investment that starts to kickstart other things. And it gets us thinking about, all right, well, is there actually a future in commuter rail that could eventually connect Ann Arbor, Metro Airport, Dearborn, and City of Detroit? And we start really thinking through, all right, well, what else does this open up? Could we have the RTA buses from the airport and Ann Arbor stop here? What does commuter rail look like? We have the intercity buses, and I think it allows for a lot more service expansion once everything is consolidated into one place. You consider it today, you have RTA stopping at different points in downtown. You have you have the Amtrak station up in New Center. You have the buses all the way down on Howard Street, and you have everything else kind of scattered in between. So I think getting everything consolidated is going to have immense benefits just to having one central location, and it's going to result in a better experience across all the modes, I think.
So you talked about the Michigan Avenue, the technology, and everything that's going on in Corktown, which is just really incredible. I mean, I don't know, it's safe to say it's not your father's Corktown. It's really not even your grandfather's. Maybe it's going to be your great-grandfather's Corktown, because that was once a bustling, thriving neighborhood.
But if I can interrupt you, but with newer bricks.
Yeah, with newer bricks. That's right. Yeah, no, good point. So, but talk about that. I mean, what's going on there, and then what Michigan Central, as such a towering presence, means as a symbol of the city's rebirth.
It's the whole we call it streetscaping. It's activation of the commercial corridor. So you think about bringing back the neighborhoods, and we've been on this concept of how do we do more investment in the neighborhoods along the street and create the kind of density that really has not existed in the city for decades. And I think this is the symbol of having an institution there is great. But it's also coming with, the activation of the businesses along the corridor. You have the Choice Neighborhoods grant that the city won through HUD a few years ago that's adding thousands of units of residential density into the neighborhoods within Corktown, within North Corktown, and the areas surrounding. And so they're all kind of key pieces together that individually they're all making little incremental bits of change, even if some are bigger increments. But when you look at the whole picture together between the new density, the new businesses, the new road infrastructure, the new train station, the new soccer stadium, it's like, wow, this is like truly transformational. We are building, not just redoing the whole neighborhood and revitalizing it and like adding amenities that the existing residents can enjoy, but we're also creating a whole lot of new amenities and new space for new residents and businesses to come to the area.
So Governor Whitmer's announcement of the memorandum of understanding was just one part of this larger vision, but it's a crucial part.
Yes.
We don't have to get into all of the obstacles along the way that got us to this point, but talk about overcoming some of those challenges and probably what it meant to you to be able to stand there and see this moment.
Well, it's really cool because we've been talking about it for so long, and the devil's always been in the details. So, with the funding, there's some nuance, but it's important to realize like we are, using some federal funding in this. We're using a good bit of state funding that's going into this, all from different sources. So part of the equation was, all right, well, where is the different funding available that we could put towards this project? And, part of this was taking a lot of lessons learned from the New Center intermodal facility and understanding, well, why were we not successful in planning and designing that project, and what can we do to make that project be successful here? And a lot of that came to like early stakeholder engagement, having really strong partners that really wanted the facility that could also help design it successfully. So figuring out the funding piece, having the early stakeholder buy-in were both like really important pieces. Contractually, like this is a detail, but it's a really interesting and important one. The way the MOU is set up is that Detroit Transportation Corporation, who historically has just been over the people mover, is also going to serve a really interesting role in being really the responsible fiduciary that's going to be responsible for the contracting and overseeing the design, feasibility, and construction of the station ultimately. But it's really interesting for DTC and People Mover because at the same time, we're also studying the expansion and future of the People Mover, whether it's through elevated rail or streetcars or enhanced bus service. And Corktown is very hot on that list for how do we have that connection between the existing fixed rail transit service that we have downtown and Michigan Central. We're about to invest a lot of money in a true transportation hub. And so the question is going to be, how do you ultimately connect them together?
Yeah, with the location of LCA and obviously Comerica Park and Ford Field, the People Movers path isn't ideal anymore. So some changes there would probably be very welcome. So on a personal note, I mean, you came to Michigan from somewhere else, from Pittsburgh, which was a couple decades ahead of Detroit in terms of its rebirth and resurgence. It's a city that's really doing well. Downtown is really bustling. So what do you hear from friends and family when you tell them the Detroit story and they kind of roll their eyes and maybe they haven't been there? So how do you talk about that?
Well, number one, a lot of friends and family try to recruit me to, you should come back to Pittsburgh and do a lot of this stuff here. But I think people want to see it for themselves. So, take my parents, for example, really no connection to Detroit. They just come up to visit, but they've seen like the press around Michigan Central and they've said, wow, we've heard all these good things about the station. We want to go visit the station while we're here. And I think for a lot of people that are not part of the city, the story is just so compelling. A lot of people now want to come to Detroit just to see these different things that are taking shape, the station being one of them. But I would say the other one that's on the horizon that's, related, unrelated is the Gordie Howe Bridge. So you think about one of the cool things with the station is, we're rebuilding the Detroit to Windsor and thereby the overall connection to Toronto on building a better, U.S., Canada, Detroit, Windsor, Ontario, Michigan, whichever, Zoom you want to take, the relationship there. And the Gordie Howe Bridge is another thing that's on the horizon that's going to happen before that. And I think it all goes towards like building these stronger connections with our cross-border colleagues to the south. And they all kind of build off of each other, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out that it's to the south. Not a lot of people realize that. And you probably didn't before you came to Detroit.
Taken me a few years to understand.
Yeah, it throws off your sense of direction. Well, that's all good, Sam. I should say congratulations to you and your counterparts at the city, and certainly the collaboration with MDOT and Amtrak and the RTA and countless others that'll be part of this as we go forward. Is there anything else you want to add?
Say like purely on the train standpoint, so building the station is like a really key milestone. The next thing is going to be to figure out the investment and support on the Canadian side so that we can have that cross-border service. So we're really looking at this in phases where our phase one is let's get the station built, let's get the Wolverine train to stop at Michigan Central. The next phase is, all right, once we have the Canadian infrastructure built, really no improvements are needed to the tunnel, but on the other side, working through the track design and stations and customs issues to allow the Canadian cross-border service to take place is going to be really cool. So, the announcement is kind of lumping it all together as one thing, but really I think we're going to see it in stages. The opening of the station first, the Wolverine train stopping at Michigan Central, and then second will be, it continuing through the tunnel up over and back into Windsor. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. Now that the funding's in place, these different puzzle pieces start to take form to ultimately realize the vision.
Yeah, Arun from Amtrak made that point that the agreement is already in place for the tunnel. So that's a really good start right there.
It is. So, we're really lucky to have such good collaborative partners. So, working not just with our U.S. colleagues for, Amtrak and MDOT, in the other communities, but it's also like Via Rail, Essex Terminal Rail, the province, the city of Windsor, and all of our Canadian partners on having that vision that we're all, working towards on our respective sides of the border.
Yeah, it's a good time to be the infrastructure officer in Detroit. So.
Good time to be in Detroit.
Yes, it is. So thanks again, Sam, as always. I appreciate you taking time to talk. I'd like to thank you once more for tuning in to Talking Michigan Transportation. You can find show notes and more on Apple Podcasts or Buzzsprout. I also want to acknowledge the talented people who help make this a reality each week, starting with Randy Debler, who skillfully edits the audio, Jesse Ball, who proofs the content, Courtney Bates, who posts the podcast to various platforms, and Jackie Salinas, who transcribes the audio to make it accessible to all.